The Amish bus driver rule is this. If you are Amish, you surely have the inalienable right to not operate an automobile. And consequently, you will not be hired to drive a bus. Seems like a fair deal, right? Well, with 32 days left in the Bush administration, the Amish bus driver rule is being broken. It's time for lame duck watch, because somebody's got to do it. Today, the Bush administration issued a new rule that permits anyone who works in a medical facility, from the chief of surgery to the janitor, to refuse to participate in any procedure they believe violates their personal, moral, or religious beliefs, say abortion or contraception or artificial insemination. The rule empowers federal health officials to cut off federal funding to any of the nearly 600,000 healthcare facilities nationwide if they do not accommodate employees who exercise their right of conscience. And when they say healthcare professionals, I really do mean anyone remotely involved in healthcare, trainees, volunteers, the person cleaning the medical instruments, the person sweeping the floors. Under existing civil rights law, doctors could refuse to do procedures. But now, whole healthcare organizations can make it their policy to not do certain procedures. So a doctor could be willing and able to perform an abortion, say, but his company's or hospital's policy could forbid him from doing so. A receptionist who morally opposes abortion or contraception or anything else that you were seeking could refuse to make you an appointment. The 127-page rule will cost more than $44 million to implement. The Obama administration says that they have taken notice of the rule, according to the Wall Street Journal. Officials in the incoming Obama administration have begun considering how and when to undo it. But reversing the rule is probably a lengthy process. Until the Supreme Court rules otherwise, abortion is legal in this country. In his waning moments as president, George Bush has imposed the moral opposition of his core constituency on the rest of the country by making the procedure as difficult as possible for those who would seek it out legally. Joining us now is Colorado Democratic Congresswoman Diana DeGette. She is the co-chair of the House Pro-Choice Caucus, and she is the vice chair of the Energy and Commerce Committee, which has jurisdiction over these issues. Congresswoman DeGette, thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be with you, Rachel.
If an American woman is prescribed birth control pills by her doctor, and she goes to have that prescription filled at a pharmacy, and the person ringing up that sale, handling the insurance paperwork, says is religiously opposed to birth control. Under this new rule, is it possible that that American woman will be denied the opportunity to get the thing she's just been prescribed?
Yes, it is. What's frightening about this new rule is that it is written so broadly that the cashier over at Walmart could say, I'm opposed to birth control, I'm not going to ring you out. That's how broad this bill is. If the pharmacist is a Christian Scientist and opposed to giving a child antibiotics, they could refuse to give that prescription. And so it's just really so broad that it denies patients health care. And I'm worried about particularly rural areas and underserved areas, minority areas, that this could be a real problem for patients.
One of the things that I find very surprising about this new regulation is that it seems to me that the way it's written, a healthcare worker or anybody employed at a healthcare facility who had religious objections to any particular services would not have to disclose that up front to patients, but also to his or her employer. So it would be like a surprise every time. You know, you get 3 sevens, you're playing a slot machine, congratulations, you get offered birth control. Next time you have no idea whether or not you'd be offered the same service.
Well, that's exactly right. And there's no standard as to what that would be. What kind of employee is it? Right now, under the current civil rights laws, what they say is an employer has to make reasonable accommodation to an employee for their religion. And so what would happen, and I think that's appropriate. Let's say an employee goes to their employer and says, I'm against birth control. Well, in that case, then the employer would have to make an accommodation to find somebody else to fill that prescription. But here, it leaves it up to the employee. So the employee could simply say, you know, I'm against giving this to you for religious reasons. I'm not going to do it. That seems to be quite dangerous.
And it would prohibit, in this case, the employer from taking that person out of that position. It would also not require the employer to make accommodation for the patient so that the patient could get that information or that service from somebody else, correct?
Right. I mean, all of these attempts are attempts to reduce the, and clearly they're targeted at birth control. Yeah. But all of these drugs that they're targeted at are legal. I always have to remind people, drugs like the morning after pill and even RU486, the chemically induced abortion, all these drugs are legal. So for people, employees, just to take matters into their own hands and start playing God and decide who gets drugs and who doesn't, that's really a dangerous precedent.
The press release that you issued today on this subject says this new rule goes, obviously it's targeted at a woman's right to choose, but it does go beyond that. It goes also to the issue of contraception. It also goes to other non-reproductive health care issues. I wonder what you meant by that. If for example, there was a doctor who was providing HIV care and decided that because of religious beliefs, he or she would not provide HIV treatment to anybody who was gay, who was HIV positive, would that be covered here?
Absolutely. And I mean, there's no standards whatsoever. Or again, the cashier at the pharmacy. Yeah. If they decided that that HIV was God's punishment or something, and they didn't want to give him the drugs, then that person could make that decision. It's just so broad. It's really disturbing, and I think you hit the nail on the head. It would actually allow employees of healthcare facilities to discriminate against patients just on a case-by-case basis.
Last question, and perhaps this is the most important question. How could this be reversed? Could this be reversed in an executive fashion by the new administration? Could it be reversed through Congress? What do you think will happen? Well,
since this rule has gone through an entire rulemaking process, it would be difficult for the administration to simply reverse it by executive order. But Congresswoman Louise Slaughter from New York and I have already introduced legislation to reverse the rule. We were going to try to bring it up in that very short session we had last week, but we thought, well, what's the point? President Bush will just veto it. So I imagine if this rule actually does get finalized, we'll bring that up early in the next Congress. But you know, the comment period, the rule doesn't take effect till tomorrow. So if people are outraged about this, they should call the White House and tell the president to put a stop to this.
Now that's an idea. We will put the White House phone number at rachel.msnbc.com today, just in case people can't find their phone books.
Great.
Colorado Democratic Congresswoman Diana DeGette, House Pro-Choice Caucus co-chair, vice chair of the Energy and Commerce Committee. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Great to be with you.